I can help you walk again.
The old man in the wheelchair didn't look up.
I don't need help walking.
Your records say different.
My records are wrong.
She set the coffee down, looked at him straight.
Then why does a man who recovered 14 months ago still sit in that chair every single day?
Then Rex Calloway looked up at her. Really looked, for the first time.
Because the man who put me here doesn't know I can stand.
The last thing most people see before they fall asleep is a ceiling. Rex Calloway saw engines every night. Same time, same chair, same silence. The garage smelled like motor oil and old leather and something else, something harder to name. Maybe it was time. The way time soaks into walls when enough years have passed through them. It was almost midnight in Sheridan, Wyoming outside. The October wind came off. The Bighorn Mountains cold and sharp. It rattled the corrugated metal walls of the Iron Ridge Motorcycle Club garage like it was trying to get in. Like it had unfinished business inside. Rex didn't flinch. He sat in his wheelchair at the center of the garage floor, both hands resting on his knees, still as a stone in a river. Around him, 8 motorcycles stood in 2 rows, polished, covered, waiting. Every one of them a Harley-Davidson. Every one of them his. The oldest was a 1958 Panhead, midnight black. Chrome so clean it threw back the overhead light like a mirror. Rex had found her in a barn outside Laramie when he was 29 years old, half buried under hay and rust, and somebody else's forgotten life. He'd spent 4 months bringing her back. He never named her. He wasn't that kind of man. On the far wall, above the tool bench, hung a single black helmet, full face, scratched along the left side from a fall back in 1994 that he didn't like to talk about. A green stripe ran from the crown to the chin, the Iron Ridge colors. Nobody touched that helmet. Nobody asked about it anymore. 3 years ago, they would have asked. 2 years ago, this garage was full of voices and laughter, and the sound of wrenches on chrome and bad country music playing too loud on a speaker. Someone had zip-tied to the ceiling. Now it was just Rex, and the bikes, and the wind trying to get in. He reached out and laid his right hand on the Panhead's fuel tank, just rested it there. Flat palm against cold metal. If you'd walked in and seen him at that moment, you might have thought he was praying. And maybe you wouldn't have been wrong. Rex Calloway had been president of the Iron Ridge Motorcycle Club for 22 years. That's not a small thing. Out here in Wyoming, the MC wasn't just a group of men who liked to ride. It was something older than that. Something that mattered to the community in ways that didn't always make it into the newspaper. When the floods came through Sheridan County in 2006, Iron Ridge was sandbagging levees before the county crews got their gear loaded. When a rancher north of town lost his barn to fire, the MC showed up with lumber and tools and rebuilt it in a weekend. When the opioid crisis hit these rural communities hard in the 2010s, and it hit hard, make no mistake, it was Rex Calloway who started the rides for recovery, who showed up at the high school, who made it clear that asking for help wasn't weakness. He was that kind of man, big, broad-shouldered even now at 67. Silver hair he wore back. A beard that had gone white at the edges, hands like 2 slabs of rough wood, built from 40 years of mechanical work. He had the kind of face that had started out handsome and turned into something better with age, weathered and specific and honest. Before the accident, he'd ridden every day he could. Rain, cold, it didn't matter much to him. He believed something about motorcycles that was hard to put into words. He believed they kept a man connected to the actual texture of the world. The wind, the road, the temperature, the way a curve came at you without apology. You couldn't be distracted on a bike. You had to be present or you'd pay for it. He'd been present every single day for 40 years. And then came the night of October 14th, 2 years ago, the Bighorn Pass. A stretch of road Rex had ridden hundreds of times. In the dark, on the descent, a semi-truck had crossed the center line and caught him at 40 miles an hour. He woke up 3 days later in the Sheridan Memorial Hospital. They told him he'd broken his left femur, 2 ribs, his collarbone, and fractured 3 vertebrae in his lower back. They told him the nerve damage was significant. They told him he might regain some function with time and therapy and luck, but he shouldn't expect to walk again the way he once had. Rex had listened to all of it, with his eyes open and his expression flat. Then he'd asked for a cup of coffee and the television remote. That was his whole response. People who knew Rex well understood that this was actually devastating. Rex Calloway didn't fall apart in front of anyone. He never had. He'd buried a son at 34, a motorcycle accident in Colorado, 2001, and he'd held himself together at that graveside like a man made of granite. He'd lost his wife, Lorraine, to cancer in 2015, and he'd cried exactly once, alone in this very garage at 2 a.m., with the door bolted from the inside. He didn't perform his pain. He carried it, and so he sat in his wheelchair at midnight in the garage, with his hand on the panhead's tank, and if you looked close, you'd see that his jaw was tight, that his eyes were somewhere else entirely, that the weight of something was pressing on him from the inside, and he was pressing back with everything he had. He sat like that for a long time. Then he reached into the chest pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a pocket watch, silver, old. The case was worn smooth at the edges from years of handling. He clicked it open, looked at the time without really seeing it, and closed it again, his father's watch, given to him the day he turned 18. His father had said, "A man who knows what time it is has no excuse for wasting it." Rex held it in his closed fist for a moment. Then he put it back in his pocket, turned his chair toward the door, and went inside. The Kettle Diner had been on Main Street in Sheridan for 41 years. 3 owners, 2 renovations, 1 kitchen fire in 1999 that everyone still talked about. The booths were red vinyl, cracked in places, patched with electrical tape in a few spots that nobody bothered to hide. The coffee came in heavy white mugs. The pie was made from scratch every morning by a woman named Dottie, who was 73 and did not take requests. It was the kind of place that smelled like butter and coffee and maple syrup. A smell so specific it could pull you back to every breakfast you'd ever eaten there the second you walked through the door. The Iron Ridge MC had claimed the 4 booths along the back wall every Tuesday and Thursday morning for as long as anyone could remember. 8, sometimes 10 men, ages ranging from 41 to 69. Mechanics, ranchers, a retired school teacher, 2 veterans. They took up a lot of space. They were loud in the way that men who've known each other for decades are loud. Shorthand jokes, comfortable arguments, the kind of laughter that doesn't need setup. They left good tips. Della Pruett had been their waitress for 6 months. She was 26 years old. She had brown hair she usually wore in a braid because it stayed out of the way, and dark eyes that missed nothing, and a way of moving through the diner that was economical and unhurried even when it was slammed. She was not small. She was medium height and solidly built, the kind of woman who'd done physical work her whole life and wore it without thinking about it. She'd grown up in Sheridan. Left at 20 when things got difficult. Came back at 25 when her mother got sick and then passed. Took the job at the Kettle because it paid decently, and the hours were compatible with the community college classes she was taking twice a week. She was working toward a nursing degree. Not because someone had told her she should, because she'd watched the nurses who cared for her mother in those final months and understood, in the way you understand things that go down bone deep, that this was something she could do and do well. She wasn't sentimental about it. She just knew the MC's regulars liked her. She was efficient. She remembered their orders without writing them down, and she didn't make a fuss over them. She treated them like regular people, which, she privately felt, was exactly what they were. She'd heard about Rex Calloway, of course. You couldn't work the back booths of the Kettle without hearing about Rex Calloway. Best president this club's had in 40 years. That was Garrett Holloway. Grit, they called him, who was Rex's second in command and had been since 2003. Big man, mid-60s, a white beard he kept trimmed, eyes that were careful and warm at the same time. He said it matter-of-factly, the way you'd state a measurement. Man could fix anything with his hands. That was Cooper, 52, who ran the best auto shop in the county and credited Rex with teaching him half of what he knew. You should have seen him on a bike. That was usually said quietly, and usually followed by a kind of collective silence that Della had learned not to interrupt. She'd heard a lot about Rex Calloway. She'd never actually met him. That changed on a Thursday in the second week of October. She heard the wheels first. The back booth crowd was halfway through their coffee when the front door opened and the sound came in. The specific soft roll and squeak of a wheelchair on old linoleum. Della was behind the counter filling a coffee pot. She glanced up. The man in the wheelchair was Rex Calloway. She knew it immediately, without introduction. Not because she'd seen a photo, but because the entire back section of the diner shifted when he came in. Not loudly, just shifted. Like a room adjusts when someone important walks in, the way the air pressure changes. The men in the back booths looked up. A couple of them started to stand. Rex waved a hand. Sit down. That's what the wave meant. No words necessary. He wheeled himself down the length of the diner with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it long enough that it no longer looked effortful. Dark jeans, work boots, a flannel shirt in dark green and gray, the Iron Ridge leather vest over the flannel. Black with patches, the top one reading President, in block letters that had been there long enough to start fraying at the edges. Della watched him navigate between the tables with the corner of her eye. She'd been around sick people. She'd been around people in pain. She'd sat beside her mother through 8 months of hard illness, and she'd learned the difference between someone whose body was failing them and someone whose body was in conflict with them. Rex Calloway moved like a man in conflict, not like a man who'd given up. She filed that observation in the back of her mind, the way she filed most things, and carried the coffee pot to the back. He'd settled at the end booth, closest to the wall, facing the door. Of course, facing the door. She'd noticed that, about the older men in this group, they always sat facing the door. She poured coffee for the others, worked her way around, and finally set a mug in front of Rex. He didn't look up. She pulled out her notepad. "Morning," she said. "What can I get you?" He looked at the menu. He hadn't opened it, just looked at the laminated surface of it, and she had the sense he wasn't reading anything on it. Then he tapped the menu twice with one finger. She waited. He tapped again. 2 eggs. Hash browns, maybe. She'd seen this before with customers who'd had strokes, who were working around a language difficulty. She started to open her mouth to offer options. 2 eggs. Over easy. His voice was low and clear, and quite specifically not a voice that had any trouble working. "Sourdough toast. Don't butter it." Della paused. "Just a half beat, so you can talk," she said. "Good to know." A breath of silence at the table. Grit looked up from his coffee with an expression that was somewhere between alarm and fascination. Rex Calloway slowly raised his eyes from the menu to her face. They were gray, his eyes. The kind of gray that had probably been blue 30 years ago. And they were, she'd look back on this later and try to find the right word, assessing. Like she was something he was trying to calibrate. A machine he hadn't seen before, trying to determine what it did. "I tapped," he said. "I know," she said. "Saw, that's my order. 2 eggs over easy, sourdough, no butter." She wrote it down, looked up. "You want anything else?" He looked at her for one more moment. Then he looked back at his coffee. "That's all," he said. Della turned and walked back to the window without hurrying. Grit leaned toward the man on his left and said very quietly, "That's the first time in 2 years someone talked back to him and didn't apologize immediately after." The other man said, equally quietly, "What do you think he makes of it?" Grit looked over at Rex, who was turning his coffee mug slowly in both hands and staring at nothing in particular. "I have no idea," Grit said. "That's what makes it interesting." Rex came back the next Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that. By the third visit, Della had stopped thinking of him as an anomaly and started thinking of him as a regular. He always came in at 7:15. He always sat at the same end booth. He always ordered the same thing, 2 eggs over easy, sourdough, no butter, black coffee, and he ate with the focused efficiencies, views breakfast as a task to be completed rather than an experience to be savored. She didn't try to make small talk with him again. This turned out to be the right move. Because Rex, she'd discovered, didn't want small talk. What he wanted, and she'd figured this out by watching, which was one of her better skills, was to be treated normally, not gently, not carefully, just normally, like a guy who came in, ordered breakfast, ate it, paid, and left, without anyone making a face that said, "I'm so sorry about the wheelchair," or adjusting their behavior to accommodate him, or speaking to him in that particular, softened tone people used around illness. He wanted to be left alone, and simultaneously he wanted to be seen as a person rather than a condition. Della understood this in her bones. She'd watched her mother fight that exact same battle in her last year. So she poured his coffee, brought his food, kept the mug full without being asked, and otherwise left him alone. When he was ready for the check, he'd set his fork down in a particular way, across the plate rather than beside it, and she'd bring it within 60 seconds. They had a system. They'd built it without discussing it. On the fourth Tuesday, something changed slightly. She was clearing the table of the booth next to his. The MC men had mostly filtered out. It was getting on toward 8:30, and he spoke without prompting. "You grew up here," he said. It wasn't a question. Della stacked the plates. "Born at Sheridan Memorial. Grew up on Laux Street." She paused. "How'd you know?" "You know every person who's walked in here by name," Rex said. "People who've been gone 15 years, you still know them. That's not learned, that's lived." She looked at him. "I left for a while. Came back, though. My mom got sick." He nodded once, very slightly. No excess acknowledgement, just confirmation that he'd heard. "You're studying," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You've been watching me, hard not to. You're the only one moving in this place." She almost smiled at that. "Nursing. 2 classes a week over at the college." He was quiet for a moment. His hand went to the pocket of his flannel shirt, just for a second, touched something there, a habit, and came back to the table. "Why nursing?" he said. Most people she'd told about nursing had either said, "Oh, that's wonderful," in a voice that meant that sounds difficult, or asked something like, "Have you thought about PA school?" as though nursing were a consolation prize. Rex asked why nursing the same way he'd ask why that brand of oil or why that road. Like the answer mattered and he'd listen to it. "Because I'm good with people who are scared," she said. "And that's most patients." He looked at her for a moment. "That's a better answer than most people give," he said. "Most people aren't asked the right question," she said. She picked up the plates and carried them to the kitchen. Behind her, she heard Rex Calloway make a sound that, if she'd had to characterize it, she would have called the beginning of a laugh. Stopped before it got all the way out. But it was there. What Della didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that Rex had been watching her with a purpose that went beyond the ordinary curiosity of a man who spent too much time alone. He knew her last name. He'd known it before she'd ever brought him a coffee mug. Della Pruett, daughter of Walter Pruett, Walt Pruett, who'd been driving an 18-wheeler for cask freight out of Billings, who'd been on the descent of Bighorn Pass at 11:43 p.m. on October 14th, 2 years ago, who'd crossed the center line and hit Rex Calloway at 40 miles an hour, who'd died in that same crash, his truck going off the shoulder and down the embankment before Rex had even stopped sliding across the asphalt. Rex knew all of this. He'd known it for 2 years. What he was still working out. What had brought him into the kettle that first Thursday, and what had kept him coming back, was simpler and also more complicated. He needed to know whether Della Pruett knew anything about that night, and he needed to know whether she was the kind of person he could trust. He hadn't yet decided what he was going to do with either answer. The first time Grit Holloway actually noticed the shift was a Tuesday in late October. He'd stayed later than the others. He sometimes did. He lived alone since his wife had moved to her sister's place in Casper, and he had no particular reason to be anywhere. He was nursing his third coffee, reading something on his phone, when he became aware that Rex and the Pruett girl were talking, not the brief functional exchanges he'd observed before. Actually talking. She'd sat down across from him. Not in a familiar way. She'd put a fresh pot of coffee on the table and asked if she could ask him something, and he'd looked at her for a moment and then nodded, which was apparently enough invitation. She'd sat down across from him in the vinyl booth, her notepad in her hand, and she'd asked him what the most important thing was that a person needed to understand about motorcycles before they got on one. Grit's first thought was, that is a strange question from someone who doesn't ride. His second thought was, Rex is going to tell her to mind her business. His third thought, which arrived about 3 seconds later, was that Rex had begun to talk, not briefly, not dismissively. He was explaining something, in the measured and specific way he had when he was actually engaged with a subject. And Della was leaning forward with her elbows on the table, listening in that way she had. Still, focused, not waiting to talk, actually listening. Grit looked down at his phone, he thought. Well, that's something. He left a 20 on the table and quietly let himself out. Small towns have a long memory. That's both their gift and their particular burden. In Sheridan, you couldn't walk into a hardware store or a barber shop or a diner without bumping into the past. A teacher you'd had in 5th grade, someone who'd known your parents, someone who'd been at your graduation or your wedding or your father's funeral. The landscape of your life was also everybody else's landscape, and they'd all been watching it longer than you'd been living it. Della had grown up knowing this and had spent some of her young adulthood trying to get away from it. She'd understood at 20 that she needed space from a place where everyone already had an idea of who she was before she'd opened her mouth. Coming back at 25 had been humbling in ways she hadn't entirely expected. But it had also been something else. The word that came to her, though she resisted it for a while, was grounding. You couldn't float too far from yourself when the people around you had known your people. Her father, Walt Pruett, had been well liked in Sheridan. That's what people said still. 2 years after he'd died, he was well liked, and they said it with that specific weight that means the loss is still real, still present, hasn't become a fact yet. Walt had been a long-haul trucker for 27 years. He'd driven for Cascade Freight out of Billings, Montana, which had routes up and down through Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. He'd been home roughly 10 days a month. He'd been a man of routine and reliability. Every year on Della's birthday without fail, regardless of where the route took him, a card would arrive with $30 in it, and a note in his handwriting that was simple and direct. Proud of you. Love, Dad. He wasn't demonstrative. He didn't have the language for certain things, but he showed up in the ways he could. After the accident, the freight company had sent a letter of condolence and the final paycheck, and that was that. There had been a brief investigation. The official conclusion, documented in the county sheriff's report, was driver fatigue. Walt had been on a long haul, and the timing of the accident suggested he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. The case was closed within 6 weeks. Della had read the report 3 times. It hadn't sat right with her. Her father had been meticulous about his hours, religious about his rest stops, had never had so much as a moving violation in 27 years. But she was 24 years old and grieving, and she didn't have the tools to question an official report. And eventually, the weight of day-to-day life had pushed the questions back to a place where they were present, but not loud. She thought about it sometimes. Usually at night, she thought about the specific shape of her father's handwriting on those birthday cards. The particular way he'd said proud of you without ever quite explaining what he was proud of, which she'd found frustrating as a teenager and understood better now. She thought about the last time she'd seen him at a gas station on the edge of Sheridan, him coming off a run and stopping to fill up before heading home, the brief hug, his jacket smelling like diesel and fast food. She thought about how she hadn't quite known it was the last time. You never quite know which time is the last time. That was the thing no one told you, and maybe it was better that way, because if you knew, you'd hold on too tight, and then you'd miss the actual experience of the moment trying to memorize it. Della asked around about Rex Calloway, not conspicuously. She was good at asking things sideways, in the middle of other conversations, in a tone of casual interest that didn't signal she was storing the answers. She talked to Marge at the hardware store, who'd known Rex for 30 years. She talked to a man named Pete, who brought his truck into the MC garage for service twice a year and considered Rex the finest mechanic he'd ever dealt with. She talked to a woman at the community center who'd been on the committee that Rex had organized for the flood relief. What she learned was consistent enough to form a picture. Rex Calloway had built something. Not just the MC, he'd built a culture around it. The club was the visible part, but there was a whole ecosystem that had grown up around the club, rooted in the same values: accountability, practicality, showing up when it mattered. He had a talent for gathering people, and a complete disinterest in being celebrated for it. She asked Grit, carefully, between his first and second coffee on a Tuesday, what Rex had been like before the accident. Grit wrapped both hands around his mug, looked at the table for a moment. Same, he said. Exactly the same. But he paused. When a man who lives on the road can't ride, when the thing that connects him to himself gets taken away, he stopped again. He's not less of who he was. He's just more concentrated. Like the same amount of everything got compressed into a smaller space. Della thought about that for the rest of the day. That evening, she looked up the accident report. It was available in the county records. Public record, not difficult to find. She'd looked at it once before, after her father died, and put it away. This time she read it more carefully. 2 vehicles. Her father's Kenworth T680. Rex Calloway's 1971 Harley-Davidson Sportster cause. Center line deviation by commercial vehicle. Contributing factor. Driver fatigue closed. December 3rd. Signed by Sheriff Boyd McCready. She sat with the document on her screen for a long time. There was nothing wrong with it. Technically, it was a proper document. It said what it needed to say, but something about the timeline bothered her. 6 weeks from accident to closed case. She'd worked enough around people who dealt with insurance and legal processes to know that 6 weeks was fast. Unusually fast. She wrote the date of closure down on a notepad. She wasn't sure why. She folded the notepad and put it in her jacket pocket and went to bed. She lay in the dark for a while, listening to the wind off the bighorns, and thought about her father's 27 years without an accident. And then she stopped thinking about it and went to sleep, because she had a 6 a.m. shift and life didn't pause for questions that didn't yet have a shape. It was a Friday. The breakfast rush had thinned out. The MC men had mostly cleared out by 8:30, but Rex had stayed, which was new. He'd ordered a second coffee, and he was sitting with it, not looking at his phone, just sitting. In that particular way he had, that was either peace or something that looked like peace from the outside. Della was wiping down the counter when Grit came back through the door. He'd forgotten his hat. He did this regularly enough that she'd started setting it aside on a hook behind the counter when she found it. She handed it to him. He thanked her. He started toward the door and then paused, looking over at Rex. He said something to Rex she didn't catch. Rex looked up. Something passed between them, a silent exchange, and then Grit nodded once and left. Della went back to the counter. Della. She turned. It was the first time Rex had called her by name. She walked over. He looked at his coffee for a moment, then up at her. Sit down. He said it wasn't a question, but it also wasn't a command. It was an invitation, phrased in the only way he seemed to know how to phrase invitations. She looked around the diner. 2 other tables occupied. Nothing that needed her in the next 5 minutes. She sat. Rex turned the coffee mug in his hands. Once, twice, 3 times. A thinking gesture. The accident, he said. The one on Bighorn Pass. She went still. 2 years ago. He looked at her steadily. You know your father was the other driver. Not a question either. I know, she said. Her voice was level. She'd learned from watching her mother that you could hold things without showing them. What else do you know? Rex said. She looked at him. Why are you asking me this? He said. Because you've been asking around about me for 2 weeks, and you looked up the county report last week. Marg called Combe? Of course, Marge had called him. Small town. Della put both hands flat on the table. Steadied herself. I know the report said my father fell asleep at the wheel, she said. I know he had 27 years of driving without an incident. I know the case was closed in 6 weeks, which is fast. She paused. I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But it bothers you, Rex said. It bothers me, she agreed. Rex looked at his coffee. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might be done talking. That this had been the whole conversation, establishing mutual awareness, nothing more. Then he said, Your father didn't fall asleep. Della's chest tightened. She kept her face still. How do you know that? She said. Because I was conscious when the truck hit me, Rex said. For about 4 seconds. And in those 4 seconds, I heard him braking. He looked at her. He was braking as hard as the truck would brake. He didn't cross that line on purpose. He didn't fall asleep. Something happened to that truck before it came off that mountain. Silence. The diner sounds continued around them. Someone's fork on a plate, the coffee maker cycling, the bell over the door as someone left. Normal sounds. Normal morning. As though the world outside their booth had no idea that something significant was being said inside it. "You've known this for 2 years," Della said. "Yes, and you haven't said anything." Rex's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker of something she couldn't quite read. Not guilt exactly. More like the look of a man who has been carrying something heavy and has not yet decided whether putting it down would be a relief or a mistake. "I had reasons," he said. "What reasons?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Not yet," he said. She felt on a surge of frustration, quick, sharp, and she let herself feel it but didn't let it into her voice, because she had the instinct, sitting across from this man, that pushing him would be like pushing a mountain, that the only way to get anything out of Rex Calloway was to let him decide to give it. So, she sat with the frustration and she breathed through it. "My father," she said. "He was a good driver, I know that," Rex said. "I looked into him." After he paused. "He was a careful man." She nodded. The word careful caught in her chest because it was so accurate. Her father had been careful. With his truck, with his routes, with his rest, with his words, with the way he showed love, careful, not careless, which people sometimes confused. You could be careful with something because it mattered to you. "He didn't leave much," she said. "My dad. He didn't have a lot of things to leave behind. He had his routes and his truck and those birthday cards." She stopped. "But he had 27 years of doing his job right. That was something. That was who he was." She looked at Rex. "And then some report says he fell asleep and crossed a center line, and that's the story. And I know somewhere that that's not right. But I don't know what to do with that." Rex said nothing. "So," she said, "you're telling me you know something." "I'm telling you," he said carefully, "that what you know and what was put into that report are two different things." "Then help me understand," she said. "Help me understand what happened." Rex looked at her. He looked at her, the way he'd looked at her that first morning, like he was calibrating something. Only this time, she had the sense that the calibration was different, that something had shifted in the equation. He reached into the pocket of his flannel and took out the silver pocket watch. Set it on the table between them. "My father gave me that," he said. "Day I turned 18. He said a man who knows what time it is has no excuse for wasting it." Della looked at the watch, worn smooth, solid and present on the vinyl table between them. "I'm 67 years old," Rex said. "I have been on the wrong side of a secret for 2 years because I was trying to be careful. And I'm starting to think careful and right are not always the same thing." He picked up the watch, put it back in his pocket. "Come to the garage tomorrow," he said. 10 o'clock. She looked at him. "Why?" "Because there are things you need to know," he said. "And I need to know something about you first." "What do you need to know?" Rex put both hands on the table. He was about to push back from the booth, done with the conversation, and then he paused. "I need to know," he said, "whether you're the kind of person who can hold a truth steady before she knows what to do with it, without it knocking her off her feet." Della held his gaze. "I watched my mother die over 8 months," she said. "I went to work every day. I took my classes every week. I showed up." She kept her voice even. "I think I can hold a truth steady." Rex looked at her for 3, 4, 5 seconds. He nodded once. "Small 10 o'clock, he said. He backed the wheelchair from the table and turned toward the door without looking back. Della sat in the booth for a moment after he'd gone, the coffee pot in her hand, her notepad in her apron pocket. She thought about her father. 27 years of careful. Those birthday cards. Proud of you. She thought about what it meant that Rex Calloway, a man who'd lost more than she probably understood yet, a man who weighed his words like they were currency, had just told her that the official story of her father's death was wrong. She thought about the pocket watch and the line about not wasting time. Then she got up and refilled the coffee at table 4, because life doesn't pause, and she had 4 more hours on her shift. But something had begun. She could feel it, the way you feel a weather change before the sky does anything visible. In your bones, in the back of your throat, in the particular quality of the air, something had started moving. And she had no idea yet where it was going to take her. She almost didn't go. Not because she was afraid. Della Pruett wasn't built for that particular kind of hesitation, but she'd lain awake past midnight, thinking about what Rex had said. Something happened to that truck before it came off that mountain. And by 3 in the morning, the thinking had started to feel like circling, like an animal that couldn't find the door. She got up at 5:30, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching the light come up over the edge of the bighorns. By 7, she'd decided she was going. By 9, she'd changed her mind twice and changed it back. At 9:50, she put on her jacket, got in her truck and drove. The Iron Ridge garage sat on the east side of Sheridan, on a stretch of road that had once been the industrial edge of town. Machine shops, a grain elevator, a livestock supply warehouse that had closed in the late 90s. Most of those buildings were empty now or converted into other things. The garage was the exception. It looked like it had always looked and always intended to look. Functional, unapologetic, built to work and not to impress. The sign above the door was simple. Black letters on white, Iron Ridge MC. Below that, in smaller letters, Estabel Usht 1982. The bay doors were open when Della pulled in. She parked and sat in the truck for a moment. Through the open doors, she could see the interior, the rows of bikes, the tool walls, the smell of oil and metal reaching her even at distance. She could see Grit Holloway crouched beside a motorcycle near the far wall, a torque wrench in his hand. She got out. Grit looked up when she came in. He didn't look surprised. He stood, set the wrench on the bench. "He's in the back," Grit said. No greeting, no preamble, just information. She walked through. The back section of the garage was separated from the main floor by a half wall and a doorway with no door. It had a desk, a filing cabinet, 2 chairs, and a coffee maker that looked like it had been in continuous use since approximately 1987. The walls were covered in photographs, group shots, rally photos, events going back decades. Men on bikes, men laughing, men in their 30s who were now in their 60s. Rex was at the desk. His back was to the door. He was looking at something, a folder or a document, she couldn't tell, and he turned when he heard her come in. "You're on time," he said. "You set a time," she said. He gestured at the second chair she sat. The chair was metal and not comfortable, and she had the sense that it had been placed precisely where it was on purpose, facing the desk, straight-backed, the kind of seating arrangement that said, "This is a conversation, not a social call." Rex folded the document he'd been looking at and set it to one side. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The coffee maker gurgled in the corner. From the main floor, the muffled sound of grit working. Metal on metal, methodical. "You said you needed to know something about me first," Della said. "I did," Rex said. "Did yesterday answer it?" He considered. "Mostly. What's the part that didn't?" He leaned back slightly in his chair. His hands settled on the armrests, not gripping, just resting. He had a way of being still that wasn't passivity. It was the stillness of a man who'd learned that most situations didn't improve by rushing. "I need to know," he said, "that if I tell you something that can't be untold, you won't do anything with it before I ask you to." Della held his gaze. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I have a plan," he said. "I've been building it for 14 months. It requires patience, and it requires nobody moving. Before the right moment." He paused. "I need to know whether you can sit with information and not act on it immediately." She thought about that for a moment, about the instinct she'd had every time she looked at that accident report. To call someone, to push, to demand an explanation. The 2 years she'd spent holding that instinct in check because she didn't know enough yet. "I've been sitting with my father's death for 2 years without answers," she said. "I think I know how to wait." Something in Rex's expression shifted. Barely. But she saw it. "All right," he said. He opened the folder and turned it so she could see. What was in the folder was not what she'd expected. She wasn't sure what she'd expected. Documents. Maybe a police report. Something official. What Rex laid out in front of her was a series of photographs, printed on regular paper. Mechanical photographs. Close-up images of brake components. Calipers, lines, fittings. Some of the images had notes handwritten in the margins in a tight, precise script. "I had a friend," Rex said. "Retired. Former NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board. He spent 30 years investigating vehicle accidents. He owed me a favor from a long time ago." Rex tapped one of the photographs. "I asked him to look at the wreck report from that night. The physical evidence that had been documented before the truck was cleared." Della leaned forward. "What did he find?" The right rear brake line on your father's truck, Rex said. There's a fitting here. He pointed to an image. A compression fitting that connects the main line to the rear axle circuit. According to the wreck report, it showed signs of stress fracture. That sounds like a mechanical failure, Della said. It does, Rex said. And that's what the county report concluded. Mechanical failure contributing to driver fatigue. Simple story. He paused. Except he laid another photograph beside the first. My friend looked at the angle of the fracture, the stress pattern, and he said, in his 30 years, he'd seen that pattern in 11 other vehicles. And in 10 of those 11 cases, the fracture had been induced manually. Not worn through, cut. Partially, carefully, so the line would hold pressure under normal highway driving but fail under heavy braking. Heavy braking like you'd need. He stopped. Like you'd need coming down a mountain pass at speed. Della sat very still. The coffee maker gurgled. A wrench rang against concrete in the other room. She looked at the photograph. At the fitting. At the fracture line he was pointing to. Someone cut my father's brake line, she said. Her voice came out flat. She'd intended it to come out flat. The alternative was something she couldn't afford right now. Partially cut, Rex said. Enough to look like wear. Enough to pass a casual inspection. But when he needed those brakes on the descent, they failed, Rex said. Della set both hands flat on the desk. Pressed down, her father, Walt Pruett. 27 years without an accident. Every rest stop logged. Every maintenance schedule followed. Carrying loads across Wyoming and Montana and Idaho for nearly 3 decades. Careful and steady and reliable. And then one night on Bighorn Pass, his truck's brakes failed because someone had put a blade to a fitting before he ever left the depot. He hadn't fallen asleep. He hadn't been careless. He'd been murdered. And Rex Calloway had been the intended target. Her father had been the weapon. She breathed in, breathed out. Who? She said. Rex held her gaze. That's the second part. Tell me. He was quiet for 3 long seconds. Not yet, he said. She looked at him. The frustration came again. Sharper this time, with something underneath it that wasn't quite anger, but lived in the same neighborhood. She could feel her jaw tighten, Rex. I know, he said. I hear you, but I need you to trust me on this. You're asking me to trust a man who sat across from me at that diner for 3 weeks, knowing who my father was and not saying a word. Yes, he said. Flat and honest, no apology in it, but no deflection either. I am asking you exactly that. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, what do you need from me? And Rex Calloway let out a breath. Slow, like he'd been holding something for a while and had just set it down. I need you to keep coming to the diner, he said. Same as before. I need you to act like nothing has changed. And I need you to tell me if anyone asks you questions about your father, or about me, or about the accident. Anyone, without exception. You think someone's watching. I know someone's watching, he said. I just don't know how closely yet. She kept going to the diner. She kept pouring Rex's coffee and bringing his eggs and acting like that Saturday morning in the garage had been nothing more than a brief conversation between 2 people who happened to have a mutual connection to a road accident 2 years ago. She was good at the surface of things when the surface mattered. But underneath the surface, something had been set in motion, and she could feel it the way you feel the current in a river before you can see where it's moving. She paid attention differently now. She noticed the way people in the diner referred to the accident, casually, sideways, in the way that small towns talk about things that have passed. She noticed that nobody ever questioned the official story, not because they believed it, necessarily, more because they'd accepted it. Because it was closed and done, and the alternative, which was that a man's death was not what it appeared to be, was a harder thing to carry than the simple version. She understood that. She'd chosen the simple version herself for 2 years. Grief makes you want things to be simple. Complicated grief is its own kind of suffering. She noticed who came and went from the garage. She wasn't obvious about it. She drove past on her way home from the diner, or from college, or from the grocery store, glancing at the lot without slowing down. She made a mental note of vehicles she didn't recognize. And then, on a Wednesday evening in the second week of November, she stopped for gas at the Conoco on the south end of town. The man at the next pump was maybe 34, 35. Medium build. Brown work jacket. He was filling a white pickup, looking at his phone while the gas ran, and there was nothing particular about him, except that when Della glanced over, she had this sudden, specific sensation of recognition. She couldn't place it. Not his face. She didn't know his face. But something about the way he was standing, the angle of his shoulders, the way he stood with his weight slightly back, like someone who'd spent a lot of time doing physical work and was always unconsciously bracing. It took her until she was paying inside before it came to her. He stood the way her father had stood. She went back out. The white pickup was still there. The man was replacing the nozzle. She didn't think twice. She walked over. "Hey," she said. "I'm sorry. I feel like I know you from somewhere." Della Pruett. He looked at her. His eyes were careful, not unfriendly, just measured. "Jake Merritt," he said. They shook hands. "You from around here?" she said. "About 3 years," he said. "Moved down from Billings. Something registered. Billings, the same city her father's freight company had operated out of." "What do you do?" she asked. "Work at the Kimball Ranch out east," he said. "Fencing, maintenance, whatever needs doing." He paused. "You?" "Waitress at the Kettle," she said. "Going to school." "Nursing," he nodded. The conversation was coming to its natural end, and she knew she had about 4 seconds to either let it or extend it. "The Kettle," he said. "The one on Main?" "That's the one." He was quiet for a moment. "Iron Ridge guys come in there, don't they?" Something shifted in the air, subtle. She wouldn't have noticed it before last week. "They do," she said evenly. "Tuesday and Thursday mornings mostly." He nodded again. Looking at nothing in particular now. "You know Rex Calloway," he said. And there it was. She kept her face exactly as it was. No change. She'd been behind a counter long enough to know how to keep her face exactly as it was. "I know who he is," she said. "He comes in sometimes." Jake Merritt nodded. He seemed satisfied with that, or at least not dissatisfied. He said it was nice to meet her and got in his truck. She watched him pull out. She stood at the gas pump for a moment after he'd gone, the cold air off the mountains finding its way through her jacket. Then she got in her truck and called Rex. He picked up on the second ring. "There's a man," she said. "Jake Merritt. Works at Kimball Ranch. From Billings. He just asked me whether I knew you." Silence on the other end. But not an empty silence. A thinking silence. "What did you tell him?" Rex said. "That I knew who you were, that you came in sometimes." "Who is he?" A pause. "Jake Merritt," Rex said slowly, like he was tasting the name. "Give me a day, Rex." "One day," he said. "Can you do that?" She exhaled. One day she drove home in the dark with the bighorns black against the sky, and thought about her father standing at a gas pump, somewhere with his weight slightly back, bracing against the world without knowing he was doing it. Rex called her the next morning at 7:15, which she realized later was exactly the time she'd normally be bringing him his first coffee. "Jake Merritt," he said. "Real name is Jake Britton. He changed his surname when he moved to Sheridan." A pause. "His mother's maiden name. Merritt." The name landed on her like something cold. "Britton." She sat down on her kitchen chair. "As in," she started. "As in Silas Calloway's stepson," Rex said. "From Silas's first marriage. The boy was 17 when Silas and his mother separated. He took his mother's name after that, Silas Calloway. Rex's younger brother." She'd heard the name in passing. The MC men didn't bring him up often, and when they did, it was with particular kind of careful neutrality that told you more than whatever words they'd chosen. "Your brother's stepson," she said. "Yes, and he's been in Sheridan for 3 years. "Yes, since just after the accident." "Yes," Rex said. Again, that flat, honest tone. Nothing hidden in it, nothing softened. "Della, I need you to understand something. Jake Britton, I don't believe he's a bad person. I believe he's a young man who's caught in something that's larger than him. And I need you to remember that when you think about what I'm about to tell you." She pressed her free hand flat against the kitchen table, grounding herself. "Tell me," she said. What Rex told her in the measured, careful way he told things was this. He had reason to believe, strong reason, documented reason, that the night of October 14th, 2 years ago, Jake Britton had been the driver of a second vehicle on that section of Bighorn Pass. Not the truck, a car that witnesses had noted in a gas station 20 minutes before the accident, parked in the lot waiting. A car that had followed Walt Pruett's Kenworth T680 up onto the pass. He didn't cut the brake line, Rex said. I don't believe he did that. That was done earlier at the depot, by someone with access and time. But I believe Jake was on that road that night to make sure it worked, to be a witness to it, and possibly to intervene if it didn't. Della's throat was tight. He watched my father die, she said. I don't know what he saw, Rex said carefully. I only know he was there. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, November had brought the first real cold of the season. Frost on the window. The mountains invisible behind low cloud. Does he know who I am? She said. I don't think so, Rex said. Your last name, Pruett, isn't uncommon. He may have made a connection or he may not have. The fact that he approached you at the pump concerns me. It means either he doesn't know, and it was a coincidence, or he does know, and he's curious about what you know. Which do you think it is? Rex was quiet, I think, he said slowly. That Jake Britton has been carrying something very heavy for 2 years. And I think he's been in Sheridan, not just because Silas sent him here. I think he's been here because he can't stay away. He paused. That's what guilt does to a person. It circles back to the thing it can't fix. Della thought about that. She thought about her father again. Not the accident, not the brake line, not the report, but her father himself. The specific way he'd said her name. The 27 years of clean records, proof of a life lived with care. He'd deserved better than what happened to him. He'd deserved the truth. What do I do about Jake Merritt? She said. Nothing yet, Rex said. If he approaches you again, be friendly, normal. Don't ask questions about Silas. Don't ask about the accident, and if he starts to ask me questions, tell me immediately, Rex said. Word for word, she breathed in. Okay, Della. His voice shifted slightly, not softer exactly, but different. I know I'm asking a lot of you. You are, she said. I know. A pause. Your father was a good man who got put in a bad position by someone he never knew. That's not a small thing, and you deserve more than being kept in the dark. Another pause. I'm not keeping you in the dark because I don't trust you. I'm doing it because there's a sequence to this, and if we move wrong, someone gets away with it, she said. Yes, he said. Someone gets away with it. She looked at the frost on the window, thought about patience, about the 2 years she'd already spent with an unanswered question pressing against the inside of her chest. Give me something, she said. Not a name, not yet. Just give me something I can hold on to while I wait. Rex was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Your father braked for 4 seconds before impact. On a descent like that, in a truck that size, 4 seconds of braking should have been enough to scrub speed. Should have been enough to correct. The fact that he stayed on the road as long as he did, given that his brakes were failing, tells you something about the kind of driver he was. She closed her eyes. He fought it, Rex said. To the end. He fought it. She held the phone against her ear and didn't say anything. After a moment she said, Thank you. She meant it for more than just this morning. She meant it for 2 years. Grit Holloway had a system for the things he knew and couldn't say. He compartmentalized. Put them in a room, shut the door, went about his day. He'd learned to do this in his early 40s. During a period of his life he didn't discuss with most people. A period of bad decisions and worse consequences that he'd worked his way out of one careful day at a time. With Rex's help, among others. He was good at the system. He'd kept a lot of rooms shut for a lot of years. But the door on this particular room had been getting harder to keep closed. On a Thursday evening, after the last member had left the garage and Rex had gone inside, Grit stayed. He often did. He'd walk the floor, check the bikes, do the small maintenance tasks that accumulated and never felt urgent enough to put on anyone's list but always needed doing. It was meditative for him. The repetitive work, the smell, the history in the walls. He was cleaning a carburetor at the bench when the door opened. He didn't turn around. He knew Rex's wheels on the concrete by now the way you know a family member's footsteps. You're still here, Rex said. Carburetor, Grit said. Rex wheeled in beside the bench. He looked at the carburetor for a moment. Then he said, How long have you known about Jake? Grit set the carburetor down. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. Since September. He said, Of this year. Yes. Rex was quiet. You didn't tell me, Rex said. No, Grit said. He picked up a rag, it back down spine, because by September you already knew. And you were already working on something. I could see it. He paused. I figured you'd tell me when I needed to know. Rex looked at him. That's a generous interpretation. Maybe, Grit said. Or maybe I just didn't want to be the one to say it out loud. He stopped. It being Silas's boy. The name settled into the room the way a stone settles into water. Disturbance first, then ripples, then the stone on the bottom, quiet and permanent. Rex said nothing for a while. Grit had known Rex Calloway for 41 years. They'd met in 1983 at a gas station outside Buffalo, Wyoming, both broken down within 20 minutes of each other, on the same stretch of highway, which Rex had always maintained was the universe's way of ensuring they met, because neither of them would have been a same bar on the same evening without external coercion. They were different men. Grit had always been the more social of the two, more comfortable in a room, more willing to let things go. Rex held things longer, processed deeper. Those differences had been the architecture of a friendship that had lasted over 4 decades. "Tell me what you know about Jake," Rex said. "What you've found out on your own." Grit leaned against the bench, crossed his arms. "He's been in Sheridan 34 months, Grit said. Came down from Billings, like he says. Work's legitimate. I checked with the Kimball family. He's a real employee. Good worker, according to them. Pays his rent on time. Doesn't cause trouble," he paused. "Meets with Silas once a month. In Casper. Not here. Restaurant near the highway. Keeps it regular. Keeps it quiet. What do they talk about?" "Don't know," Grit said. "But I know what I think." Rex waited. "I think Jake Britton is Silas's insurance," Grit said. "Eyes on the ground here in Sheridan. Close enough to see what's happening with you, with the MC, with anyone who might be asking questions. Far enough away that the connection isn't obvious." He paused. "And I think Jake doesn't entirely want to be doing it anymore, which is why he's been here 3 years and nothing has happened." Rex considered that. His hand went to his shirt pocket, the pocket watch, and rested there a moment. "You think he went sideways on Silas," Rex said. "I think Jake Britton is a young man who was asked to be part of something and didn't fully understand what he was agreeing to," Grit said. "And now he's stuck." He shook his head. "Silas always did have a talent for that, finding people who need something, offering it to them. And by the time they understand the cost, they're already in." Rex's expression didn't change visibly. But Grit had known him for 41 years, and he could read the tells, the slight tightening around the eyes, the way the hands settled differently on the armrests. "You're talking about more than Jake," Rex said. "I'm talking about what Silas did to the people around him for 30 years, Grit said. "I'm talking about a pattern." Rex was quiet for a long time. The garage held them both in its familiar smell and silence. Grit had one more thing to say, and he'd been debating whether to say it for about 3 weeks. "He said it now, Rex. When this comes out, and it's going to come out, because you're not the kind of man to let it stay buried. There's going to be a version of events where you don't look entirely clean either." Rex turned to look at him. "The thing with Silas in 2006, Grit said carefully. "The way that was handled. A lot of people are going to want to know that story. And some of them are going to ask whether what happened on Bighorn Pass was something Silas chose, or something you created the conditions for." A long silence. "Are you asking me that?" Rex said. Grit met his eyes. "I'm telling you that someone will." Rex held his gaze. Then he looked away, down at his hands. "I know," he said. "Quiet, heavy, I know that." He sat with that for a moment. Then he turned the chair and went toward the door. "Go home, Grit," he said without turning around. "It's late." Grit looked at the carburetor on the bench, the rag beside it. "Yeah," he said. "I know it is." The first time Della saw Silas Calloway was a Tuesday morning. She didn't know it was him, not at first. He came into the kettle at 8:15 after the MC crowd had thinned, but not cleared entirely. He was 62 years old, maybe 5'11", the same silver-white hair as Rex but worn shorter and neater. He was dressed well, not flashy, but you could tell the clothes cost money. Dark jeans without a crease in them, a wool sweater in dark gray, a watch that caught the light. He carried himself with the ease of someone who was accustomed to being looked at and considered it his due. He sat in the front section, not the back, not the MC section. Della brought him a menu and coffee. "Thank you," he said, and smiled at her. It was a good smile, the practiced kind, warm on the surface, calibrated at the depth. She'd served enough tables to know the difference between a smile that was interested in you and a smile that wanted something from you. This was the second kind. She smiled back the way she smiled at all her tables and moved on. Halfway through his breakfast, Eggs Benedict, which Dottie made on Tuesdays only, he called her over. "You're good at this," he said, nodding at the room generally. She kept her expression easy. "I've had practice. How long you been here?" he said. "About 6 months. Local girl?" "Born here," she said. He nodded, still with that calibrated warmth. "Nice town. I grew up near here. Haven't been back in a while." He glanced toward the back booths, and the glance was brief and casual, and she filed it away immediately, because it was neither of those things. "I saw some bikes out front. MC's guys coming here?" "Tuesday and Thursday," she said. "Huh," he looked back at his plate. "The Iron Ridge boys?" "That's right," she said. "Good group," he said, with the tone of someone who hadn't seen them in a long time and had complicated feelings about that. "I used to know some of them. Years ago." He paused, in a way that invited follow-up. She didn't follow up. She smiled pleasantly and said, "You need anything else?" He looked at her for a moment. "Measuring. I'm good," he said. "Thank you." She walked back to the counter. Her heart rate was up slightly. She breathed through it. She did not look at her phone. She waited until she was in the back kitchen, ostensibly checking a supply order, and she typed one line to Rex. "Man, here. Wool sweater. Gray hair." Asking about the MC, Rex's reply came in under 2 minutes. "Don't look at him again. Don't engage. I'll call you at noon." She put her phone in her apron pocket and went back out to the floor. Rex called at noon. "Silas," he said. She was in her truck in the parking lot behind the diner, engine running for the heat. "Your brother," she said. "My brother, he came into the kettle." "I know," Rex said. "Which means he's shifted something. He's been staying back, using Jake to keep an eye on things. Coming in himself is a change." A pause. "Did he get a look at you?" she said. "He asked whether the MC guys came in. I confirmed it. I didn't give him anything." "Good." Another pause. "Did he recognize your name?" "I didn't give him my name." "Good," Rex said again. She stared out at the parking lot. November in Sheridan. Bare trees. "A light skim of snow on the far mountains, Rex," she said. "I need to understand something. Not the plan, not the sequence. I trust the sequence. But I need to understand the why before I can keep going." A beat of silence. "Silas," she said. "Why? Why would someone do this? You're his brother. The MC is your life's work. Why would he want to?" She stopped. Started again. "Help me understand the kind of man who would do this." Rex was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different. Not softer, but different in the way a man's voice gets when he's talking about something he's lived with so long that the words have worn smooth. "Silas and I built Iron Ridge together," he said. 1982. I was 25. He was 20. We rode together, worked together, built something that mattered in this community." He paused. Silas was good at the beginning of things. Always. Vision, energy, the ability to bring people in. He was genuinely talented. Another pause. The problem was what happened after the beginning. She waited. "He couldn't sustain it," Rex said. "He'd start something, pour everything into it. And then, when the real work began, the slow, grinding daily work of keeping something alive, he'd look for a shortcut. And when there wasn't a shortcut, he'd look for someone else's resources." He paused. "In 2003, I started noticing money wasn't adding up. Club funds. We had a construction project going, new facility, and the numbers didn't match the work. I looked into it. Took me about 8 months to be sure. And it was Silas," she said. "It was Silas," Rex said. "Not a large amount, not by some standards, but enough to matter, and enough that I had to deal with it." "What did you do?" Rex said nothing for a moment. "I handled it as president," he said. "Not as a brother. I removed him from his position. I documented it through club process. I presented it to the other officers. A beat. I also, and this I've thought about many times since," I told his wife, "because she was asking questions and I thought she deserved to know." "She left him," Della said. "She left him," Rex said. "And the marriage was already struggling. The money thing was the last of several things. But it was the official reason. And Silas," he stopped. "Silas blamed me, not himself, not the choices he'd made. He blamed me for telling her. He blamed the way I handled it, formally through the club. He said I'd had other options, that I could have dealt with it quietly." "Could you have?" Della said. A long pause. "Maybe," Rex said. "Maybe I could have gone to him first. One-on-one, as a brother, before it became a formal action." Another pause. I chose not to. I was angry, and I convinced myself that anger was the same as being right. He was quiet for a moment. I've had 2 years in a wheelchair to think about the difference between those two things. She sat with that. Outside, a gust came through and lifted the light snow off a parked car hood in a brief swirl. He blamed you for 18 years, she said. Yes, Rex said. And then he did something that got my father killed. Rex's voice was very steady when he answered. Yes. She put her head back against the headrest. She thought about the calculus of it. How much pain could accumulate inside a person over 18 years? How it could calcify. Harden into something that didn't look like pain anymore. Looked like strategy instead. She understood it. She didn't forgive it. But she understood it, Rex, she said. Yes, when this is done, she said. When there's justice for my father. And when people know the truth about what happened on that road. She paused. You need to say the other thing, publicly, that you handled 2006 wrong. As his brother, Rex was quiet for so long that she thought maybe she'd gone too far. Then he said, I know 2 words. But the weight in them was the weight of something he'd been carrying for a long time. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She hadn't intended to be there. She was coming back from a late study session at the college. A group had stayed until 10:30 working on a pharmacology module, and then one of the other students had needed a ride across town. By the time she'd dropped her off and driven back, it was past 11. She drove past the garage out of habit now. Just a glance. The lights were on, not all of them, just the work light over the bench, visible through the high windows along the side wall. The orange glow of it against the November dark. She slowed. Parked on the side street without quite deciding to. She sat in the truck for a minute, told herself this was foolish, told herself whatever Rex was doing at 11 p.m. was his own business, told herself she should drive home and sleep. She got out of the truck. The side door, the one the members used rather than the bay, was unlocked. She pushed it open quietly, stepped in, and stopped. Rex Calloway was standing, not sitting in the wheelchair, not leaning on anything, standing. He was at the far end of the garage beside the 1958 Panhead, and he was on his feet, fully upright, both hands resting lightly on the bike's handlebars. He was wearing the same clothes he usually wore, jeans, flannel, the vest, and he was standing the way a man stands when standing is not difficult, easy, natural. He was looking at the black helmet on the wall. Della stood in the doorway. She should have said something. She knew she should have said something, but she couldn't, quite. Because what she was seeing it was a lot of things at once. Relief, for one. Some part of her had been worried about him in a way she hadn't acknowledged to herself. And beneath the relief, something more complex. Something that had to do with the 2 months she'd spent watching him navigate the world in that chair. And believing, as he'd intended her to believe, that it was the only way he could navigate it. He stood there in the quiet garage with the low light on him, and his hands on the Panhead's handlebars, and he looked like himself, like the photographs on the walls, like the man people described when you said should have seen him before. He hadn't lost that. It was still there. She must have made a sound, or the door had moved in the draft, because he turned. He saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he reached back and pulled the stool from behind the bench and sat on it. Not the wheelchair, just the stool. A reasonable place to sit at a workbench. How long have you been standing there? He said. His voice was level. Long enough, she said. She walked in, pushed the door closed behind her. The cold stayed outside. She came to the bench and sat on the other stool, 6 feet from him. The Panhead between them and slightly to the side, its chrome catching the work light. Neither of them says anything for a moment. She looked at the black helmet on the wall. When? She said. He understood the question. 8 months after the accident, he said. The vertebrae healed better than they predicted. The nerve damage, most of it resolved. 8 months, she said. That's 14 months ago. Yes. You've been able to walk for 14 months. Yes, she let that settle. She thought about all the times she'd watched him navigate in the chair, the effort of it, or what had looked like the effort of it. She thought about the Tuesday mornings, the breakfast orders, the way he maneuvered between the tables, all of it deliberate, all of it performance, in the most precise sense of the word, a role that served a purpose. She wasn't angry. She'd expected to be angry, and she wasn't. That surprised her. "Tell me why," she said. He looked at the helmet, then at her. "When I realized it was Silas," he said, "I understood something. Silas is careful. He's been careful for 30 years. Not about everything, but about the things that protect him. If he'd tried to hurt me and failed, and then he found out I was investigating, he would disappear. He would pull every thread back, and I would have nothing. And he would wait 10 years, 20 years, and try again. So you made him think it worked," she said. "I made him think the accident had done what he intended," Rex said. "A man in a wheelchair is not a threat. A man in a wheelchair is a man who's already been defeated." He paused. "Silas needed to believe I was defeated, that I was sitting in that garage waiting to die. As long as he believed that, he stayed close enough to watch. And as long as he stayed close enough to watch, he stayed close enough to catch," she said. "Yes," Rex said. She thought about the patience required for that. 14 months of staying in the chair. 14 months of never walking in front of anyone. Of waking up every morning capable of standing and choosing not to. "That's an enormous thing to carry," she said. "It's nothing," Rex said, "compared to what your father carried for the last 4 seconds of his life." The words landed quietly, without drama. Just truth. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about patience, about the different shapes it took. Her father's patience, careful, steady, 30 years of showing up. Rex' patience, strategic, cold on the surface and burning underneath. Her own patience, which she was still learning the shape of. She thought about the nursing degree, and the reason she'd given Rex for wanting it. "I'm good with people who are scared." She thought about her mother in those last months. She thought about what it meant to sit beside someone in the dark and not offer false comfort. Just presence. Just the simple refusal to leave. Maybe that was what she was doing here, she said. "What do you need from me, going forward? What do you actually need?" Rex was quiet. "I need you to talk to Jake Britton," he said. She hadn't expected that. "Why?" "Because I believe Jake is close to breaking," Rex said. "I believe he's been carrying this for 2 years and it's eating him. And I believe," he paused carefully, "I believe that you are the person who could create a space for him to tell the truth. Not because you push him, but because of who you are." She looked at him. "You know who I am," she said. Wasn't quite a question. "I know that you can sit with someone in their fear and not make it worse," Rex said. "I saw it the first day you walked up to my table and talked to me like a person instead of a condition." He paused. "Jake Britton is frightened. He's been frightened for 2 years. He needs to talk to someone who won't judge him before he's finished speaking." Della sat with that. She thought about Jake at the gas pump. The familiar way he'd stood, the weight slightly back, the careful eyes. "He doesn't know who I am," she said. "No," Rex said. "And you don't have to tell him. Not yet. Just find a reason to talk to him again. Let him talk." He paused. "Can you do that?" She looked at him. The man who'd been sitting in a chair for 14 months that he didn't need. The man who'd built a trap out of his own defeat. The man who'd told her her father had fought to the end. She thought, "This is a complicated person." She thought, "So is everyone." She thought, "My father would have liked him." "Yeah," she said. "I can do that." Rex nodded once, small and certain. "Then it's time," he said, to start moving toward the truth. She stood, picked up her jacket. At the door she stopped and turned back. The garage was quiet around him, the bikes in their rows, the helmet on the wall, the low orange light, Rex on the stool, solid and still, the way he always was. And for the first time she saw it for what it was. Not emptiness, not defeat. The stillness of a man who had decided something and was willing to wait as long as it took to see it through. "Rex," she said. He looked at her. "For what it's worth," she said, "you should take that helmet off the wall. It belongs on a head, not a wall." He looked at the helmet, back at her, something in his face that she could only describe as not quite a smile. "But adjacent to one thing at a time," he said. She went home through the November dark, behind her, in the garage on the east side of Sheridan. A man who could walk chose to sit a little longer, because the right moment hadn't come yet. But it was getting closer. She didn't engineer it. That was the thing she'd think about later. She didn't plan a meeting, didn't manufacture a reason. She just let life do what life does in a small town. Loop back. Put people in the same place at the same time, without asking their permission. It was a Saturday afternoon, first week of December. Cold but not brutal yet. The sky was the particular pale blue of Wyoming winter, clean and high and without mercy. She was walking the river trail after her morning shift. She did this sometimes. The physical movement helped her think. When she saw the white pickup parked at the east end of the lot by the cottonwoods, Jake Britton was sitting on the tailgate. He wasn't doing anything. Not his phone, not a book. Just sitting there with his hands loose in his lap, looking out at the Tong River moving slow and dark between its frozen edges. The look of a man with nowhere to be, and no peace in the being there. She almost kept walking. But she thought about what Rex had said. Jake Britton is frightened. He needs to talk to someone who won't judge him before he's finished speaking. She thought about her father. 27 years of careful. She changed course and walked toward the tailgate. He heard her footsteps on the gravel and looked up. Registered her. Something moved across his face. Recognition. And underneath it, something guarded snapping into place. "Hey, she said. "Della, we met at the Conoco, I remember," he said. She gestured at the tailgate beside him. "You mind? A beat." He shook his head. She sat on the cold metal of the tailgate. Not close. Enough space between them to be comfortable. She looked out at the river. Neither of them said anything for a minute. That was fine. She'd learned patience in harder rooms than this one. "You come out here a lot?" she said eventually. "Easy. Not probing sometimes," he said. "Me too, after shifts. Helps me decompress." She watched a piece of ice move through the water. "Long drives do the same thing for my dad. Used to." He drove long haul. She felt him go still beside her. Not visibly. But the air between them changed. She didn't look at him. Kept watching the river. "He passed," she said, simply. "No invitation for condolence, couple years ago. Road accident." Silence. "I'm sorry," Jake said. His voice was different from the gas station. Quieter. Something in it that had more weight. "Thank you," she said. "He was a good man. 27 years driving without a serious incident." She paused. "I used to think that was the thing that made it hardest. That he was so careful, you know? Like if he'd been reckless, that would have been its own kind of answer. But he wasn't reckless." She stopped there. Not pushing. Just leaving the words out in the cold air. Jake was very still. She watched the river 30 seconds. "What was his name?" Jake said. "Walt," she said. "Walt Pruett." The silence after that was different from the silence before it. She heard Jake exhale. Slow and unsteady at the edges. Like something that had been held in for a long time was finding a small crack to leak through. She still didn't look at him. This was important. Looking at him right now would feel like pressure, and pressure would close him down. She'd learned this beside her mother's hospital bed. There were moments when the only way to hold space for someone was to give them the experience of not being watched. "I was there," Jake said. 2 words. Barely audible. She breathed in, kept her hands loose on the tailgate. "On that road?" she said. "Quiet, no accusation, just the question." "Yes." His voice was rough now. I was supposed to." He stopped. Started again. "I was in a car on the highway that night. I was supposed to watch. Just watch. Make sure it." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Make sure the accident happened," she said softly. "I didn't know," Jake said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "I didn't know someone had messed with the truck. I was told it was going to be staged. An argument, a confrontation. I was told nobody was going to get hurt. I was told." He stopped. She let him stop. Let the river fill the space. "When I saw the truck go off the road," Jake said, "I stopped. I got out. I could see it wasn't staged. I could see what had actually happened. And his voice broke completely. He put one hand over his mouth. She let him have that. Full minute of silence. Then, carefully, she said, "Did you call for help?" "Yes," he said. "I called 911. I stayed until I could see the emergency lights coming up the highway. And then he took a shaking breath. "I left. Because I was terrified. Because I understood that I'd been involved in something I didn't understand and someone was dead. And I didn't know what would happen to me." She looked at the river. She thought about her father. 27 years of clean records. The last seconds on that road. Doing everything right, with everything failing around him. She thought about this young man who'd been put on that road by an older man, who'd given him a story that wasn't true, who'd watched something go wrong and lived with it for 2 years. She thought about the different shapes that guilt takes, the way it circled back, the way he'd come to Sheridan and stayed. She said. He looked at her. His eyes were red. "I'm Walt Pruett's daughter," she said. He went completely white. She held his gaze. She made her face what she needed her face to be. Not anger, not grief, not accusation, just steady, present. The same quality she'd tried to bring to her mother's bedside when there was nothing left to fix, only someone to stay with. "I know who you are," she said. "I've known for a few weeks. And I'm telling you now because you deserve to hear it from me directly. And because what I'm about to say is something you need to hear." She paused. "My father's brakes were cut. You didn't know that. The person who put you on that road that night lied to you about what you were part of. What happened to my father wasn't your fault in the way you've been carrying it." Jake said nothing. He seemed unable to speak. "That doesn't mean there's nothing to answer for," she said. "You were on that road. You left. You've been quiet for 2 years. Those things have consequences, and you're going to have to face them." She kept her voice even. "But the weight you've been carrying, the weight that brought you to Sheridan and kept you here, that specific weight is not yours alone. You were used by someone who knew exactly what he was doing." Jake was shaking slightly. "Not from the cold. The brakes," he said. I didn't know." "I know," she said. "If I'd known." "I know," she said again. And she meant it. She meant it all the way through. They sat on the tailgate in the December cold for another long time. Eventually Jake said, "What happens now?" "That depends on you," Della said. "There are people who want the truth, who've been working toward it for a long time. And there's a point coming where the truth is going to come out regardless." She paused. "The question is whether you're on the right side of it when it does. Whether you tell what you know, honestly, and let that be the thing that defines you, or whether you wait for someone else to tell it for you." She looked at him. "I think you already know which one you can live with," she said. Jake looked out at the river. The ice moving slow and dark and cold. "The man who sent me there," he said, "who lied to me." She waited. "It was my stepfather," he said. "Silas Calloway." "Yes," she said. He looked at her. "You already knew that too." Yes, something in him shifted. Some layer of the isolation he'd been carrying. The sense that he was the only person who knew, the only person living with this particular knowledge in the particular dark, cracked and let in air. "Tell me what I need to do," he said. And Della Pruett, 26 years old, waitress and nursing student and daughter of Walt Pruett, who had braked for 4 seconds at the end of his life, told him. Rex had set the meeting himself, a text to Silas' phone, a number he'd kept in his contacts for 2 years without using. Short message. Need to talk. Brothers only. Route 14 rest stop. Wednesday noon. He'd told no one about it. Not Grit. Not Della. This was the part of Rex's nature that Grit had learned to recognize and worry about. The way he sometimes moved alone when alone was the wrong way to move. When solitude became a kind of pride. He'd done it in 2006 too. Handled the Silas situation as president first and brother not at all. And the cost of that particular choice was still being paid in blood and asphalt on a mountain road. He knew he was doing it again. He went anyway. The rest stop on Route 14 was the kind of place that existed everywhere in the rural West. A pull-off, a couple of picnic tables, a pit toilet, a view of the landscape that stretched out so far, it stopped being scenery and started being just the world. In summer, there were families here. In early December, there was no one. Rex parked his truck and transferred to the wheelchair. Cold bit at him immediately, the kind of cold that came in off the high country with intention. Silas pulled in 8 minutes later. He drove a gray SUV, new, the kind of vehicle that expressed a careful relationship with money. Not flashy, but not cheap either. He got out in his good coat and walked to where Rex had positioned himself beside one of the picnic tables out of the wind. They looked at each other, brothers, 5 years between them. The same silver hair, the same jaw, the same way of standing, or in Rex's case, the same way of not standing. They'd built something together 40 years ago. They'd eaten at each other's tables and been in each other's lives for 6 decades, with the gap of the last 18 years laid across all of the scar. "Rex," Silas said. "Silas," Rex said. Neither of them offered a hand. Silas sat on the edge of the picnic table, which put him slightly above Rex's eye level, probably deliberate. Rex noted it and let it go. You look all right, Silas said. I'm cold, Rex said. A thin smile from Silas. You could have picked somewhere with a roof. I wanted open ground, Rex said. No walls. Silas looked out at the landscape. A hawk moved in the distance, easy on the updraft. What do you want to talk about, Rex? October 14th, Rex said. 2 years ago. Silas was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, what about it? I know it wasn't an accident, Rex said. Another silence. Longer this time. You've been talking to people, Silas said. I have, Rex said. I've been doing a lot of things you didn't know about. Turns out a wheelchair makes people underestimate you. Silas looked at him then. Really looked. Something moving behind his eyes. The quick recalculation of a man who's suddenly unsure of the ground he's standing on. You're making an accusation, Silas said. Not yet, Rex said. Right now I'm offering you a conversation. What kind of conversation? The kind we should have had in 2006, Rex said. And didn't. Silas stood up from the table, moved a few steps away, hands in his coat pockets, looked out at the highway. A truck passed, long and loud going east. Then quiet again. You want to talk about 2006, Silas said, flat voice. Now, I want to talk about the fact that I handled it wrong, Rex said. I had options. I chose the one that protected the club and didn't protect you. And I've known that for a long time, he paused. I should have come to you first, as your brother, before any of the formal business. I didn't do that, and I'm telling you now that I was wrong. Silas Sass turned. Rex expected something. Anger, or cracking open or something. Some shift in the 18 years of distance between them. What he got was nothing. Silas looked at him with an expression that was smooth and unreachable and said, Is that what you think this is about? An apology? Rex held the gaze. I think it's part of it, an apology, Silas said again, and something in his voice had gone very cold. Not the heat of old anger, something colder. You took everything, Rex. My position, my marriage, my standing in the community I'd helped build. You documented it and presented it like a case to a jury and made sure everyone knew, and then you told my wife. He stopped. Started again, quieter and more controlled. My wife left and took my son and I had nothing. And you think, a pause. You think an apology is what this is about? No, Rex said. I think what this is about is that you hired someone to put a blade on a brake line, and a man died. A man who had nothing to do with any of this. Walt Pruett drove trucks for 30 years. And he died on a mountain road because of something between you and me, and no apology covers that. The wind came through the rest stop, moving the dried weeds along the fence line. Silas looked at him. Interesting theory, he said. His voice had become something else now. Professional, like a door being closed and locked. You have evidence for this theory? Enough, Rex said. Enough, Silas repeated. He seemed to be measuring something. Rex, you're in a wheelchair. You've been in that wheelchair for 2 years. You've been sitting in a garage mourning your bikes and alienating the people who care about you. Whatever you think you know, he shook his head. Go home. Let it be. I can't do that, Rex said. Why not? Because of the man who died, Rex said. Simply because it was his daughter. Because of the 40 years I spent telling this community that accountability is what separates civilization from the alternative. Because of every speech I ever gave and every standard I ever held. He looked at his brother. I can't look at any of that and then look at myself in the same mirror. Not if I let this go. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You always did love the sound of your own principles. He walked to his SUV. At the door, he paused. Didn't turn around. Whatever you think you have, Silas said, isn't enough. I've been careful, Rex. I've been careful in ways you don't know about yet. And if you push this, another pause. People you care about will get hurt. I want you to understand that I'm not making a threat. I'm telling you the practical reality of the situation. He got in. The SUV pulled out and turned east. Rex sat in the cold at the rest stop and watched his brother's taillights disappear around the bend. The hawk was still moving on the updraft. Easy, circular, unhurried. Rex reached into his shirt pocket, took out the pocket watch, held it in his closed fist. His father had been a man who believed in doing things right, who believed that process and integrity were not obstacles to justice but the foundation of it, who had told Rex, more than once, that the moment you started cutting corners on your own principles was the moment you became the thing you were fighting against. The confrontation had failed. He'd known it might. Silas was smart and careful and had had 18 years to build the armor he needed. But Rex had also learned something. Silas was scared. The careful voice, the controlled exit, the warning that wasn't supposed to sound like a warning. A man who was genuinely untouchable didn't need to say anything at a rest stop on Route 14. He'd said things, which meant he believed somewhere underneath the armor that Rex was closer than he was comfortable with. Rex put the watch back in his pocket. He turned the wheelchair toward his truck. Time to move. Grit found it. He'd been going through the old filing cabinet in the back office. The one that nobody had opened properly in years, that held the club's paper records going back to the early 90s, before everything went digital. He was looking for something specific. The financial records from 2002 to 2006, the years before and during the Silas situation. Rex had asked him to find whatever physical documentation still existed. It was slow work. The files were disorganized in the particular way that things get disorganized when they're filed by many different people over many years, with no consistent system. He went through folder by folder. He found the financial ledgers, copies of the original documentation Rex had used to build the 2006 case against Silas. He set those aside. He found meeting minutes, event records, insurance documents going back to 1994. And then, in a manila folder at the very back of the bottom drawer, he found something he hadn't been looking for. A letter, not a formal document, handwritten on plain paper. Rex's handwriting, Grit knew it instantly. Tight, precise, slanting slightly to the right. He read the first paragraph and set it down, picked it up, and read it again. He sat in the old metal chair in the back office of the garage for a long time, holding the letter, looking at nothing in particular. Then he went to find Rex. Rex read it standing. Grit had brought it to him in the main garage floor, and Rex had taken it from his hands and read it. And at some point between the first line and the last he had, without appearing to notice he was doing it, risen from the wheelchair. He stood there holding the letter. The letter was dated December 2005. 10 months before the formal action against Silas. 10 months before the documentation, the presentation to the officers, the removal from position. It was a letter Rex had written to Silas. A letter that had never been sent. In it, Rex laid out what he'd found. The discrepancies in the accounts. The money that had moved in ways that didn't match the records. He wrote it plainly, without accusation in the tone. Just the facts, laid out clearly. And then at the end, a paragraph that Grit had read 3 times to be sure he'd understood it. Silas, I'm going to ask you to come to me before I take this anywhere. I'm giving you first because you're my brother and I believe that means something. I'm asking you to come to me. Tell me what happened, and let us work this out between us before it becomes something else. I will be waiting for that conversation until March. If I don't hear from you by March, I will have no choice but to handle this through club process. I don't want that. I am choosing to believe you don't want it either. The letter was never sent. Rex stood holding it, and his face was very still, and the stillness was the kind that covers something deep. March 2006, Grit said quietly. What happened in March? Rex didn't answer immediately. Lorraine's got sick, he said. First diagnosis. March 2006, he paused. I got the news and He stopped. I forgot about the letter. I was dealing with Lorraine and I never sent it. And by the time she was stable, 3 months had passed, and I told myself the deadline had passed. And I went straight to the formal process. Grit said nothing. The garage held them both. He never got the chance to come to me, Rex said. I offered him the chance, and then I took it away without telling him. You didn't take it away on purpose, Grit said carefully. Intent doesn't always determine outcome, Rex said. He set the letter on the workbench, looked at it. He could have come to me anyway. The formal action didn't happen until October. He had months to come to me on his own. He paused, but he didn't know I'd written the letter. He didn't know I'd wanted to give him that chance. He just watched the deadline pass, and then watched me build a case against him. He reached out and pressed the letter flat on the bench. Smoothed it. This is the thing Della told me I'd have to say, Rex said. Publicly. That I handled 2006 wrong. She was right, Grit said. I know. It doesn't excuse what Silas did, Grit said. No, Rex said. It doesn't. Not by insistence. He looked at the letter. But it's true. and it needs to be said. He picked up the letter, folded it carefully. I want Jake Britton to see this, he said. Grit raised an eyebrow. He needs to understand the full picture, Rex said. He's been carrying a version of events that made his stepfather the injured party. He deserves the whole story. He paused. And he's going to be a witness in what comes next. I want him to be a witness who understands what he's witnessing. Grit nodded slowly. Della talked to him, he said. It wasn't a question, she did, Rex said. He's ready to do what's right. He just needs to know the whole truth before he does it. He set the letter in his vest pocket, looked around the garage, the bikes in their rows, the black helmet on the wall. He was still standing. He hadn't sat back down. Grit noticed but said nothing about it. Some things you let a man come to in his own time. They came one at a time, Della first. Then Jake, who had to ring the bell twice before the door opened, and who stepped inside with the particular careful tread of a man entering a room where he knows he is not entirely welcome and has decided to enter anyway. Then Grit, who had simply been there all along. Then Cooper and two others from the MC who Rex had called that afternoon with 4 words, tonight. The garage. 8. They arranged themselves around the main floor, some on stools, some standing. Jake on a folding chair near the door, which Della noticed and understood. Close enough to feel included, positioned for a quick exit if things went wrong. Rex was at the center, not in the wheelchair, on the stool from the workbench, which he'd placed in the middle of the floor, just sitting on a stool. Like a man who sat where he chose to sit because that's what men who can walk tend to do. Nobody said anything about the wheelchair. Nobody asked. The chair was in the corner and nobody looked at it. Rex looked around the room. I'm going to tell you everything, he said. All of it. The accident. What I know about how it happened and who was responsible. What I've done over the last 14 months and why. He paused. And something else. Something about 2006 that I should have told the full truth about a long time ago. He started with the brake line, the NTSB contact, the analysis, the compression fitting, the fracture pattern. He laid it out the way he laid everything out, in sequence, without editorializing, the facts building on each other until the structure they formed was impossible to misread. Walt Pruett's brakes had been cut. The truck's failure on Bighorn Pass was not mechanical, chance, and not driver error. Someone with knowledge of commercial vehicle systems had created a failure point, designed to activate under heavy braking at speed. He watched Grit's face. Grit knew most of this. The others didn't. Cooper's jaw was tight. The 2 others who'd come, men in their 50s, men who'd ridden with Rex for decades, were very still. Jake was looking at his hands. Rex moved to the question of who. He explained Silas. The methodical version, nothing embellished. The meeting at the rest stop, the way Silas had spoken. The calculations behind the careful words. Then he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the letter. He read it aloud, the whole thing. His own words from December 2005. The offer to Silas that had validity reached Silas. The deadline that had passed because Lorraine got sick, and the letter stayed in the filing cabinet. The room was very quiet when he finished. I did what I believed was right in 2006, Rex said. The documentation was accurate. The financial irregularities were real. Silas took money from this club, from the people in this room. And that was not something I could ignore. He paused. But I could have handled the first conversation differently. I could have gone to him as his brother, before I went to him as president. I chose not to, in part because I was angry, and I told myself the anger was the same as being right. He looked around the room. I was right about what he did. I was wrong about how I did it. And a man is dead partly because of the distance between those two things. He looked at Jake. Jake met his eyes. You were put in an impossible position, Rex said to him directly, by someone you trusted, who told you what you needed to hear to get you on that road. That doesn't absolve the choices you made after, but it changes the shape of them. He paused. What you do in the next few days will matter. Not just for the legal piece of this, for who you are when you're on the other side of it, Jake said. I'll tell what I know. All of it. I'll go on record. Rex nodded. Once. Clean, Sheriff McCready, Rex said then, looking at Grit. Boyd, Cooper said. Surprise in his voice. Boyd closed the accident report in 6 weeks, Rex said. He signed off on the driver fatigue determination. He may have been pressured. He may have made a judgment call he shouldn't have made. Rex kept his voice level. Boyd McCready has been the sheriff of this county for 16 years. He's made more good calls than bad ones in that time. But he needs to answer for this one. He paused. I called him this afternoon. He's coming in tomorrow morning. The room absorbed that. Della, who had been quiet through all of this, said, "What about the FBI?" Jake's account, combined with the mechanical analysis and the financial trail between Silas and the freight depot, is enough for a federal investigation, Rex said. The brake modification crossed state lines in terms of the contract work. That makes it federal jurisdiction. He paused. I've been in contact with an agent in the Denver field office for 6 weeks. She's waiting for our package. Grit looked at him. 6 weeks? Yes, Rex said. You've had all of this for 6 weeks, and you didn't tell me. You would have pushed to move faster, Rex said. I needed the timing right. Grit opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the ceiling. You impossible man, he said, not unkindly. Something moved through the room that was close to the release of a long-held breath. Rex looked at the black helmet on the wall. Tomorrow, he said. Boyd comes in the morning. We give everything to the FBI in the afternoon. Silas will likely be contacted within 48 hours. He paused. Between now and then, everyone in this room stays quiet. No calls, no texts, nothing that could give him reason to move or destroy anything. He looked around at the faces. The men who'd been with him for decades. Della, who'd been with him for 2 months and had already proved herself in ways that took other people years. Jake, who was pale and tired and had chosen something difficult and was going to live with that choice for a long time, but was going to live with it, honestly. I know I've asked a lot of people in this room to trust me over the last 2 years, Rex said. Some of you more than others. He looked at Grit when he said it. I won't ask for your forgiveness tonight. That's not mine to ask for on a schedule. What I will say is that everything I did, the chair, the patience, the waiting, I did because I believed it was the only way to make sure it came out right, not just legal. Right, he paused. Walt Pruett drove 30 years without causing harm to a soul. He deserved a better end than an official report that blamed him for his own death. And his daughter, he looked at Della. His daughter deserved to know the truth about her father, that he was careful and good, and that what happened to him was not his fault. Della held his gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Tomorrow, Rex said again, and that was the end of the meeting. Sheriff Boyd McCready came at 8 in the morning. He drove himself, no deputy. He walked into the garage in his uniform, his hat in his hands, and he looked like a man who'd spent a night deciding something and had arrived at the decision already depleted by the effort of reaching it. Rex was at the workbench, standing, not performing it, not making a statement out of it, just standing because it was time. Boyd looked at him. You're standing, Boyd said. I've been standing for a while, Rex said. Boyd took that in without comment. He set his hat on the bench. I made a call in 2021 that I shouldn't have made, Boyd said. I got pressure from above my pay grade, and I told myself it was a clean accident and there was no need to dig. I knew it was fast. I told myself 6 weeks was enough. He looked at Rex. I told myself you were in a wheelchair and you weren't going to push it, and a family had lost someone and reopening it would only cause more pain. He paused. I convinced myself I was being compassionate. You were being convenient, Rex said. Yes, Boyd said. I was. He didn't flinch from it. What do you need from me? A statement, Rex said. Sworn. Everything you know about the pressure you received, who it came from, what was said, and the original evidence from the accident scene, whatever still exists in county records. I kept a copy, Boyd said quietly, of the original evidence file, before it was processed. I've had it in my safe for 2 years. He paused. I kept it because some part of me knew I might need it someday. That's not the same as doing the right thing. No, Rex said, it's not. But it helps. Boyd sat down. He looked at his hands for a moment. Rex, he said, 50 years we've known each other. I know, Rex said. I'm sorry. Rex was quiet for a moment. He thought about what he'd said in the meeting the night before, about apologies and accountability being different things. He thought about the unsent letter in his vest pocket. He thought about the different ways that men failed the people they cared about, not usually through malice, but through a particular kind of self-deception that felt From the inside, like reason I know you are, Rex said. Let's make it mean something, the FBI agent. A woman named Reyes, methodical and direct, with the specific quality of someone who had heard many stories and believed in the ones supported by evidence. Drove up from Denver that afternoon. Jake gave his statement for 2 hours. Grit provided the mechanical analysis. Boyd provided the original evidence file and his own statement about the pressure to close the investigation. Rex provided the letter, not because it was legally relevant to Silas's crime, but because Agent Reyes, who was thorough, had asked for the full context, and Rex had decided that if the full context was going to be known, he was going to be the one to give it. He sat across from her in the back office of the garage and told her everything. The 2006 situation, the financial records, the formal action and the removal, the letter he'd written and never sent because his wife got sick, the 18 years of silence between brothers. The night on Bighorn Pass Reyes listened. She wrote. She asked clear questions and accepted clear answers. At the end, she said, "You understand that your actions in 2006 will be examined as part of establishing motive." "I understand," Rex said. "And you're comfortable with that?" "I'm not comfortable with it," Rex said, "but I'm prepared for it." "There's a difference." She looked at him for a moment, the specific look of someone filing a person away into a category. "Okay," she said. "We'll be in touch." Silas was contacted 41 hours later. Rex heard about it from Grit, who heard it through Boyd. Silas had been at his home in Casper when 2 federal agents knocked on his door. He'd opened the door and seen their credentials and said, according to the agents, nothing for approximately 15 seconds. Then he'd said, "I'd like to call my attorney," which was his right. Rex heard this and felt, not satisfaction exactly, something quieter than satisfaction. The particular stillness that comes when something that has been in motion for a long time finally stops. He was in the garage when Grit told him. He was standing at the panhead, hand on the tank, same as he'd stood any number of nights over the past 2 years. Except this time he wasn't sitting afterward. This time he straightened up and turned and walked to the wall and reached up and took down the black helmet. Grit watched him. Rex turned the helmet in his hands. The scratch on the left side from 1994. The green stripe, the Iron Ridge colors. He looked at it for a long time. "You know what Della told me?" he said. "What?" Grit said. "She said it belongs on a head, not a wall." Grit said nothing, but his expression did something. Rex walked to the 1958 panhead, sat on the saddle, not carefully, not gingerly, just sat on it the way a man sits on a bike he's been riding for 35 years. "Bighorn Pass," Rex said. "I want to go up Bighorn Pass. It's December," Grit said. "I know what month it is." Grit looked at him. "You haven't been on a bike in 2 years, I know. The road's going to be Grit." Rex looked at him. "Come with me or don't, but I'm going." Grit stood there for a moment. He was 64 years old, and he'd spent 41 years watching Rex Calloway do exactly what Rex Calloway decided to do, and there had never once been any point in talking him out of it. "Let me get my jacket," Grit said. Della was at the college when her phone rang. She stepped out of the hallway into the cold and answered. "Come to the east end of town," Rex said. "Route 14 toward the pass. There's a pull-off about 2 miles before the summit." "Why?" she said. "Because I'm going to ride up Bighorn Pass," he said. "And I thought you might want to be there." She stood in the cold December air outside the college building. The sky had gone gold in the west, the way Wyoming skies do in late afternoon. Extravagant and indifferent and beautiful in equal measure. She thought about her father. She thought about that road. She thought about what it meant that this man, who had sat in a chair for 14 months that he didn't need, who had written a letter he'd never sent, who had spent 2 years building something patient and quiet out of his own grief, was going to go up that road today, on a 1958 panhead. In December. "Yeah," she said. "I want to be there." She was at the pull-off when she heard them coming. 2 bikes. The deep particular sound of Harley engines on the winter air. Not loud, exactly, but present, full. The kind of sound that gets into your chest before it gets into your ears. They came around the lower curve and she saw them. Rex on the panhead, black helmet with the green stripe. Grit on his own bike behind, giving Rex space. They were not going fast. They were going the right speed for the road, and the light and the moment. Rex pulled into the pull-off and stopped. He sat there for a moment with the engine idling, looking up the road. The pass climbing away from them through the pines and the snow thick. On the higher elevation, the light going amber and cold. Then he looked at Della. She walked to the bike. She looked at him, this man she'd known for 2 months. The president of Iron Ridge MC. The man who'd sat across from her in a diner booth and said you're on time and meant it as a compliment. The man who'd told her her father had fought to the end. She thought about what she wanted to say and realized she didn't need to say any of it. Some things don't need to be said to be understood. My father braked for 4 seconds, she said. He did, Rex said. He was trying to protect whoever was in the road. Yes, Rex said. He was. She nodded. Okay, she said. Go up the road. Rex looked at the pass, the way the light fell across the curve where the road climbed. He thought about October 14th, 2 years ago. The specific second before impact, when he'd been completely present. No past, no future, just the road and the speed and the thing coming at him. He'd thought about that second many times over 2 years. He thought about it now without flinching. He thought about Walt Pruett in those 4 seconds. A man he'd never met. A man who'd done nothing except be on the same road at the same time. Who'd braked as hard as he could, with everything he had. Who'd died trying. Some people get the story they deserve. Walt Pruett hadn't. But his daughter was standing here in the December cold, knowing the truth now. And the man who'd sat in a garage for 2 years building toward justice was going to ride up a mountain on a 1958 panhead. Because some things need to be done, not for strategy or justice or any external reason, but simply because they are right. Rex reached into his shirt pocket. He took out the silver pocket watch, held it in his fist for a moment. Then he held it out to Della. She looked at it, looked at him. Keep it, he said. For a while, she took it, felt the weight of it. Worn smooth at the edges, a man who knows what time it is has no excuse for wasting it. Rex, she said. He looked at her. My dad would have liked you, she said. Something moved across Rex Calloway's face, all the way through. Not performed, not managed. Just real. I think I would have liked him too, he said. He looked up the road one more time. Then he rolled out of the pull-off and started up Bighorn Pass. Della stood at the edge of the road and watched him go. The sound of the panhead moved up the mountain, lower in the cold air, steady, unhurried. She watched until the road curved and he was out of sight. Then she stood listening to the sound until that too was gone. Absorbed into the pines and the cold and the wide Wyoming air, she held the pocket watch in both hands. She thought about her father, the birthday cards. Proud of you. The specific way he'd said her name. The 27 years of careful. The 4 seconds. She thought about what it meant to carry something for a long time, and then be allowed to set it down. Not because the weight had been light, but because the truth had finally caught up with the story, and the story had finally become honest. She thought about something Rex had said weeks ago in a different conversation. Patience and right are not always the same thing. She thought he'd been wrong about that. She thought, standing here in the December cold, watching the road where his taillights had gone, that sometimes they were exactly the same thing. That sometimes the most patient choice was the only right one. And that, knowing the difference, that was the work of a whole life. She opened her hand and looked at the watch, clicked it open, looked at the time, closed it. She put it in her jacket pocket and got in her truck and drove back to Sheridan. 3 weeks later, federal charges were filed against Silas Calloway. Conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with a vehicle, and several associated counts. Jake Britton provided a full statement and cooperated with the investigation. His attorney negotiated accordingly. Sheriff Boyd McCready announced that he would not seek re-election. His statement was brief and unembellished. He said he had not always done the right thing, and he intended to spend whatever time remained in his term doing better. The county reopened the investigation into Walt Pruett's accident. The official determination of driver fatigue was formally withdrawn. A new record was entered. Walt Pruett, 27 years without incident, had died as the result of criminal sabotage of his vehicle. He bore no responsibility for what happened on that road. Della had the new record framed. She hung it in her apartment, on the wall above her desk, where she studied for her nursing degree. She could see it from anywhere in the room. The federal process moved quickly after that. Silas Calloway was formally charged in the third week of December. His attorney filed the expected motions. The wheels of the system turned the way they turn. Slowly and without drama, and with the particular grinding sound of something that cannot be stopped once it is started. Rex did not go to the arraignment. He didn't need to. But 2 days before the new year, something happened that nobody had planned. Silas called. Rex's phone rang at 7 in the morning. He looked at the screen, looked at the number, sat with it for 3 full rings, then he answered. Neither of them spoke for a moment. I got your letter, Silas said finally. The one you wrote in 2005. Rex was quiet. Grit sent me a copy, Silas said. Through my attorney. A pause. He didn't have to do that. No, Rex said. He didn't. Another silence. Longer, I would have come to you, Silas said. His voice was different from the rest. Stop. The armor was gone. What was underneath it was not what Rex had expected. Not rage, not calculation, just the man who was tired. If I'd gotten the letter, I would have come. Rex believed him. That was the hardest part, I know, Rex said. That doesn't change what I did, Silas said. No, Rex said. It doesn't. A long quiet, Rex. Yes. I'm sorry about the trucker, Silas said. Walt Pruett. He had nothing to do with any of it. That was, his voice broke slightly. Not performed. Just broke. That was wrong. That was the wrong thing, and I can't. He stopped. Rex sat in his garage in the winter morning with the phone against his ear. He looked at the panhead, the helmet hanging back on its hook temporarily. He'd put it back after the ride, not out of habit but out of something he hadn't found the right word for yet. A placeholder. A way of saying, not done yet. He thought about Walt Pruett. 27 years without causing harm. So 4 seconds at the end of his life, fighting for control of a truck whose brakes someone else had decided to destroy. He thought about Della, standing at the pull-off in the December cold, holding the pocket watch. He thought about the letter he'd written in December 2005 and what it had cost. Not the writing of it, but the not sending of it. The way a single small failure of follow-through could splinter into years of consequence. I know you are, Rex said. That's not enough, Silas said. No, Rex said. It's not. The call ended quietly. No resolution, no forgiveness declared. Just 2 old men who had once built something together and had spent the years since destroying it, arriving finally at the rubble and looking at each other across it. That was all. That was, Rex thought, the honest end of it. Iron Ridge MC held its annual winter meeting on the first Saturday of January. Rex stood at the front of the room, not on a stool, not in a wheelchair. Just standing, he told them everything. The accident, the chair, the 14 months, the letter, what he'd gotten right and what he'd gotten wrong and why the difference mattered. When he finished, the room was quiet. Grit, front row, arms crossed, carefully neutral. So what now? Rex looked at him. We do what we've always done, Rex said. Show up, do the work, take care of the people around us. A pause. I've been sitting down for 2 years. I have some catching up to do. A laugh moved through the room. Real, not polite. On a Tuesday morning in January, Della arrived at the kettle at 6 a.m. for her shift. At 7:15, the bell above the door rang. She looked up from the counter. Rex Calloway walked in. Not wheeled. Walked. In his jeans and his flannel and his Iron Ridge vest, with the black helmet tucked under one arm, and he walked down the length of the diner to the back booth, the end one, closest to the wall, facing the door, and he sat down. He looked at the table, looked up at Della. She walked over, set down a mug, poured the coffee. He looked at the mug, looked at her. 2 eggs, he said. Over easy, sourdough. Don't butter it. She looked at him for a moment. The man who'd sat in this booth for 2 months in a chair he didn't need, who'd told her father fought to the end, who'd ridden up a mountain in December on a 66-year-old motorcycle, because some things need to be done just because they're right. I know your order, she said. He nodded. She turned to go. Della, he said. She turned back. He reached into his shirt pocket. She thought for a moment he was reaching for the pocket watch, but he pulled out something smaller, a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table. She unfolded it. It was a receipt from Sheridan Memorial Hospital, dated 18 months ago. Physical therapy, outpatient, 1 session. At the bottom, in Rex's handwriting, discharged. Full recovery. No further treatment required. She looked at it, looked at him. I never needed you to help me walk, he said. But he paused, and it was a real pause, the kind that happens when a man who doesn't often struggle for words actually struggles for words. I needed someone who would talk to me like a person and not a condition. Someone who would. He stopped again. I needed the kind of company that tells you the truth. She looked at him for a long moment. That's a very complicated way to make a friend, she said. The corner of his mouth moved. That almost smile she'd seen twice before and thought about since. I'm a complicated person, he said. I noticed, she said. She folded the receipt and set it on the table between them. She went to put in his order. The diner hummed around them. Coffee and butter, and the sound of the morning going about its business. The bell above the door, the Wyoming winter pressing cold against the glass. Rex Calloway sat in the back booth, with his black helmet on the table beside his coffee, facing the door, and he looked like a man who had been somewhere very hard and had come back from it without losing anything essential, which was exactly what he was. Outside, the panhead was parked at the curb, black and chrome in the winter light, 66 years old and still running. A man takes care of something for long enough, it takes care of him back. That's not always how it works. But sometimes, when the right amount of patience and truth and the willingness to stand up when it matters most come together at the right moment, sometimes it is. Walt Pruett knew that. He'd known it every mile of 27 years on the road. His daughter knew it now too. And Rex Calloway, who had learned it the hard way, the only way some lessons come, through a long stretch of sitting still and paying attention, carried it forward. The way a good man carries what he's been given, all the way to the end of the road.